On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk CEDIA Expo cancellations. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 289, Potato Cameras.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Draper.
Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. And this week, I'm pleased to be joined by three of my longtime friends. First, we have Katie McGregor-Bennett. She's the president of KMB Communications. How you doing, Katie?
Yeah, never better.
Never better?
Never better. We'll discuss.
Yeah, you'll understand in a moment. Just wait, dear listener. Then we have my longtime friend, but first-time guest on this show, Mr. Steve Greenblatt. He is the president of Control Concepts. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad to be joining you today.
Thank you so much for being here. And last but certainly not least, we have my favorite Florida man and yours, Mr. Seth Johnson. He is a software development manager at Blackwire Design. He's already shaking his head. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. We always like to round it out with someone from Florida. Enough of that joke. I'm sorry. I'm feisty today. If you're wondering why we're all feisty, it's gonna be a good show though. If you have missed it, it seems that the dominoes are falling. The list of exhibitors who are pulling out of CEDIA just continues to grow. Katie's phone's been blown up. My phone's been blown up for, 7 days now, Katie?
At least.
We can blame Snap, though. Like, we blame Snap for a lot of things, and we can blame Snap for this one, too, because they kicked it off. If you missed it, this does come to us from CE Pro, but it's all over the Facebook groups. If you're in any tech-related anything online, you'll see this. Snap announced they were going to pull out on Thursday. On Friday, a bunch of other companies continued. Legrand sent their official statement this morning. Samsung's out. I believe Sonos is out. Oh, gosh. I had a list. It's a long list. It's something like 20-plus vendors are already out with more on the way, which is... I shouldn't say more on the way. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I'm expecting to see more on the way. Katie, you obviously do a lot with CEDIA directly, but you also own a PR firm that does a lot of work with some of the manufacturers that typically exhibit at the show. I'm not going to ask if any of your vendors have pulled out. Have they pulled out? Are they going to pull out? But it's not looking good.
Yeah.
What do you see for the rest of this week? Do you think we're going to have the somewhat expected... trying to phrase this to not pull my lawyers into this one.
yeah, danger, Will Robinson.
Yeah. I am not going to be surprised if I hear CEDIA Expo 2022. And this just gets glossed over as far as this year and go down as a missed opportunity. What do you see happening for vendors, for exhibitors, and for attendees in the next week? Is this the day to start looking and verifying your travel is refundable?
Yeah. I think it's a few things, and I'm just going to pause and put out my disclaimer too, which is nothing. Most of what follows has not been validated. There is much hearsay and a lot of chatter, but I do know that there's, as you said, the dominoes are following. Several brands in our portfolio have already committed to being out, and every one of them is pondering, and that's just in our book. I think, as an industry, we have to accept that every brand is considering what their play actually is going to be. And it's, for a number of reasons. Okay. So there's corporate liability. and having your employees, your resources moving, traveling, going to an event, gathering in mass indoors. And that's a concern for the larger brands for sure. There's the ROI conversation, which is, okay, so if some of these brands pull out, what does that do to the attendee count? And is there going to be a strong enough attendee attendance for those who are remaining as exhibitors to justify the cost and the potential risk and liability for doing so? And I think that right now that's the bigger concern, is there's a lot of smaller brands that make up this show that have already an investment they can't afford to lose. But as of now, and as of many weeks ago, the commitment was 100%. So if you backed out even a month ago or longer ago, you still had to pay 100% of what your booth would have cost. That's significant. I mean, that's small booths start at $30K. Let's just wrap arms around that number. And if you're a smaller brand and just right off the bat, you're going to make the decision today, you're out tens of thousands of dollars, then what else comes behind that? And I think that's huge. But then, let's just be realistic, supply chain, right? And that's, we're talking about a trade show that is predicated on the fact that we've got products that we can actually sell. And so much of that is in question right now with supply chain, that it just, it's a really hard decision for brands to make right now. Do we support the community and go because that's what we've always done, and we need to support the community because we need to support the community? Cool, yeah. But if the attendees aren't there in the kind of numbers that justify it, that's asking a lot of brands to put on their shoulders and putting them and their families at risk. For me, I come from a small community, and so my decision, at the end of the day, I'm a rep, right? So I kind of feel like I have to be there. All of my rep friends are saying the same thing. I'll tell you that as of last night, I don't have a single rep in my circle that's going anymore.
Yeah.
Because their brands aren't going. And many of those announcements haven't been made yet, but those decisions are being made. So to your question, as it was originally stated, now is a real good time to look at your plans and make sure that you know what it's going to cost you to go and what it's going to cost you not to go, and start making some decisions, or at least start getting your plan A, your plan B, and your plan C in place. And I think that's the biggest thing. But it's Monday. This is being recorded on Monday. By Wednesday?
Yeah. This will post on Wednesday, so there'll be a bunch of new info on Wednesday. So you'll get a follow-up from me likely on Wednesday.
Exactly.
And to be fair, we can sell the product, we just can't deliver it.
Right.
That seems to be the bigger issue. Steve, I know you were super excited about this because this is the first time in 5 years, 7 years that Control Concepts was going kind of back to Expo, and being a part of the show in an official capacity, I guess is, maybe I'm overphrasing that, but as not a manufacturer, but as a company that, works in the industry and is working on developing partnerships and developing relationships, in a different manner than I would as an integrator. The potential minimalistic aspect of this show, from how it looks kind of today, again, it'll probably look different on Wednesday when this airs, and it'll probably look different Monday next week. What's going through your mind as you're following this, seeing the reports? Is this something where, as of today, you look at it and go, well, maybe we don't go?
So the first thing that goes through my mind is disappointment. I mean, I've been looking forward to going for a long time. We made a decision a few months ago, and we've been doing some work behind the scenes to kind of prepare a strategy, and we've made appointments. I mean, we honestly had 2.5 days of the show booked, because one of the things that we do is we work with the manufacturers to help them make their products easier to program, and we work with their APIs and do control integration. So it was, we kind of treat a trade show the reverse way, where we're going there to to build partnerships with manufacturers, but we also get a lot out of the other attendees. So going and seeing people and building our brand within the community was a great opportunity for us now, especially since the the commercial side of the business is probably lagging right now in its recovery. So we've been trying to lean in more and invest more on the residential side. So it's a big disappointment. But to answer your question more directly in terms of our decision making, the decision is almost being taken out of my hands and our hands, because if our appointments get taken off of our calendar, it's really hard to justify going. And I've even thought of, can we go for less days? And it doesn't, I can't figure out one way or another to do it. It's really, we're going to go or we're not going to go. And unfortunately, the way things are trending, they're taking away that opportunity. As much as and living in the Northeast and, outside of New York, we've endured quite the experience with the pandemic. I started to travel again, even though I was reluctant, but I felt good about going, honestly, and I felt good about the opportunity to see people, and honestly, I mean, this may be my perspective and it may be limited, but I need things like this as a small company to be able to go out and make connections and see what's going on and hear what the industry is talking about. It's so important, and there's only so much you can do from behind your computer screen or on the phone. I always say, a trade show just gets a month's worth of work done in a week. So, yeah, but that's our take.
And I don't think that can be overstated. Seth, I was following a Twitter chat on Sunday, AV in the AM, with my good friend Mr. Chris Netto, and one of the questions was, with uncertainty with trade shows again this year, does there come a point where these become obsolete? And you read through a lot of the responses, and they're what you would expect. The one I didn't see, which is why I added it, was to Steve's point, smaller companies really capitalize on trade shows. This is when they get to see vendors. This is when they get to evaluate new vendors. For smaller manufacturers, this is a make or break. Like, this is their Oscars. This is their big event that takes them from, their garage to their big break into the business. And I think we're kind of, at least I'm maybe making the assumption that this is not going to go forward, or it's not going to go forward in really much of a effective manner. If it is a incredibly limited show, or if the show gets canceled, what does it mean to the smaller vendors and the smaller AV firms who don't get visits from reps, that don't get manufacturers calling them to come demo product for them?
That's a good question. So first, I want to echo everything that Steve said.
Don't sound so surprised by the good question.
I know, it's a good question. I do want to echo the disappointment that Steve was relaying there. Even as a vendor, on the vendor side, I can tell you, I'm disappointed I don't get to go to the show this year. It's usually a lot of fun, and here we go again. Another one that's what are you going to do? What more is there to say about that? And then I also want to, Katie took everything out of my mouth anyway, so like everything she said is right on the money. As far as smaller vendors and even bigger vendors getting in front of people, we're looking at the show. I think they announced that there were only like 6,000 registrants, and they were expecting maybe 10,000 people last week. I want to say the show was probably in the 20s, 25, somewhere in there, in the past few years when we had normal years, in the before times. And now, 10,000, even 10,000 is just a tiny speck on the dot there. Like, how are you expected to spend those marketing dollars, those $30,000 booths, just for the floor space, as a smaller vendor, just to show up for 6,000 to 10,000 people? That's not going to be there. And I think it's going to be, we're going to realize that not everything revolves around these trade shows, and showing up in person like this, although it's an important aspect of it. As one of the things Steve said really hit with me, coming from being a dealer. Sometimes it was hard to get my hands around the neck of some trade rep or some salesman over at a company and say, hey, I would like to sell your product. And you had to go to the show and physically get in their face and demand that you be able to sell their product before they would even allow you to talk to the company. So trade shows are great for that. And but at the same time, I think manufacturers and vendors are going to have to step up their sales to get around that problem. And I thought one of the things, and far from me to like blame Snap for anything, but I don't think they're at fault for this. They didn't kick things off specifically because I saw that Savant had actually
Savant was out first.
Out first, yeah. But
I should have corrected that.
Yeah.
One of the things that Bob Madonna said I thought was pretty interesting in his statement to dealers was, "We look forward to meeting you, assuming safer conditions, early next year as Savant prepares smaller, targeted events for 2022, starting in Q1." And I mean, that sounds a whole lot to me like those Crestron road shows that were just, really, really successful as far as any dealer I ever talked to said they had a great time at those and they got the information they needed. It really sounds like some smaller, more targeted events are the future of marketing and the way that vendors are going to be able to get in front of dealers in the future.
I agree. For what it's worth, I'm just going to jump in and say I absolutely agree. And in fact, just in the time that we've been recording, not since we started talking, the time we've been recording 15 minutes, we've gotten 2 announcements, 2 more brands. But that's not the point of me bringing it up. The point is that they're saying the same thing about we're looking forward to targeted in-person events. So I think, and that's something that I am a big supporter of. I hate to see what's happening, but I just have to be real. I'm not surprised at all. And it's not a good time to gather large groups for a number of reasons. And I think that the smaller regional event really makes a lot of sense when you're talking about needing to engage with the integration community and get products in their hands in a tangible manner so that they know what they're dealing with, what's changed. We've kind of got to get right to the masses right now. So, I think the smaller group gatherings, that's cool. We figured out how to do that. And quite honestly, as a brand representative, we've got to get into a position where brands can be presenting and showcasing their products, their initiatives, their new lines, independent of another major event right next to their competitors. That's really not, that should be a supplementary activity. And I know I'm going to hear some backlash on that, but I mean, this is just as a brand, you've got to be able to have a one-on-one conversation so that your message reaches your audience and it isn't diluted or distracted. And I think that this is the opportunity that we have as we're looking at what's happening here is brands are going to lose a lot of money regardless of what happens here. They have the potential for losing a lot of money. So could that be reinvested into the smaller footprint for the near future and just get us through this time? Big shows they need to come back, but now it's just maybe not the right time for that. But we have an integration community that has got to get the hands on products. So how do you do that? Smaller regional focused events makes a ton of sense.
Hey, thanks for watching the first segment of this week's episode. To catch the entire show, please click the link below or visit avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.